Welcome to the channel An Echo of the Past. My name is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Some knew me as Mahatma, which means great soul. But I was only an ordinary man with an extraordinary dream: to see my country free and my people living in peace. Today I will tell you my story, as I lived it, from the earliest memories of my childhood to the moments when my life became part of history. I was born on October 2nd, 1869, in the small coastal town of Porbandar, in today's Indian state of Gujarat. My family was respected, though we were not wealthy. My father, Karamchand Gandhi, was a Diwan, something like a prime minister, in the local principality. He was a man of firm character, just and decisive, and yet kind. My mother, Putlibai, was a quiet and deeply religious woman. Her life was guided by strict spiritual principles, fasting, prayer, and ensuring our household lived honorably. From her, I inherited patience, faith, and discipline. As a boy, I was not remarkable. I was shy, reserved, and kept to myself. At school, I was neither the best nor the worst. What fascinated me most were stories of truth and courage. I still remember the legend of King Harishchandra, who never lied, even when it cost him everything. These stories left a deep mark on me and became the foundation of my later life. Childhood in Porbandar was simple, but already within me an ideal was forming: that truth and nonviolence are stronger than any weapon. At the age of 13, according to the customs of the time, my parents arranged my marriage to Kasturbai, a girl my own age. We were still children, not understanding marriage, but together we slowly learned what it meant to share a life. I completed school without great difficulty, though I was not exceptional. My teachers would have said I was timid and withdrawn. Yet I felt I must continue my studies. The path led me to England, where I decided to study law. Leaving India was difficult for me and my family. My mother feared the West would lead me away from our faith and traditions. I promised her I would remain true, avoiding meat, alcohol, and vices. In London, I found myself in a completely different world. A young Indian in a foreign land, unsure and shy. At first, I was lost. In language, in dress, in customs. But slowly I realized Europe could offer me more than legal training. I began reading about religions, philosophy, and above all, moral principles that transcend nations. It was in London that I became a vegetarian by conviction, not only out of my promise to my mother. There I also found friends who believed, as I did, that the way we live is as important as what we say. In England, I finished my law studies, and with diploma in hand, I returned to India. I believed I would become a successful lawyer, but life had prepared another path for me. When I returned from England to India, I thought I would be an esteemed lawyer, but reality was different. In court, I was too shy. My voice trembled, and often I could not even finish my speech. My beginnings were more a series of failures than victories. When I began to doubt my future, an offer came that changed my life. An Indian company asked me to represent them in a legal case in South Africa. It was to be for 1 year. I agreed, not knowing I would remain there much longer. South Africa was a shock. I had never before experienced such open and humiliating discrimination. One incident is etched forever in my memory. I was traveling by train in first class with a valid ticket. Yet the conductor demanded I leave the carriage. Simply because I was Indian, I was thrown out onto the platform, left standing in the cold night. That moment was a turning point. Standing there, humiliated and shaken, I realized I could not live like this. I could not watch my people treated as inferior. In that instant, the determination was born in me to resist injustice, not with force, but in another way. I stayed in South Africa far longer than I had planned. There, I learned to organize protests, draft petitions, and lead people to defend themselves without violence. It became the first laboratory of my life's philosophy, the philosophy that later became known as Satyagraha, the force of truth. South Africa became my second home, though I had gone there only for a year. The longer I stayed, the more I understood that the struggle I had begun was not mine alone, but belonged to thousands of Indians living and working there. The laws against Indians were harsh. We could not travel freely, own land, and were even forced to carry passes as if we were criminals. I saw my brothers and sisters living in constant fear and humiliation, but I knew the answer could not be violence. If we took up arms, we would only confirm what our oppressors believed, that we were savages to be kept under control. Instead, I sought another power, the power of truth and nonviolence. I called it Satyagraha. It meant to resist evil, but without anger, to stand against injustice calmly, yet firmly. Whether through peaceful demonstrations, refusal to pay unjust taxes, or the quiet acceptance of punishment, we showed that human dignity could not be broken. Those were hard years. I was imprisoned several times, and my wife Kasturbai and our sons had to accept that family life gave way to struggle. Yet it was in South Africa that I first saw nonviolent resistance achieve results. When the government finally repealed some of the harshest laws, I knew we had done more than win small concessions. We had proven that truth and nonviolence could be stronger than the whip or the rifle. And I said to myself, if it was possible in South Africa, why not also in my homeland, India? In 1915, after more than 20 years, I returned to India. I was unsure how my country would receive me. Until then, I had been only a lawyer who had found his voice in South Africa. In India, however, a whole generation already longed for freedom, and I felt my struggle was only beginning. When I stepped off the ship in Bombay, people greeted me with joy that surprised me. Yet I did not feel like a hero. I knew I first needed to know my country again. I traveled from village to village, saw the poverty of peasants, the injustice of colonial taxes, the suffering of ordinary people. It strengthened my conviction that India needed change. I did not immediately step to the forefront. I needed to learn from those who already led. I was grateful to work with Gopal Krishna Gokhale, a prominent leader of the Indian National Congress. From him, I learned that political struggle must always be linked with moral responsibility. Soon after my return, I had the chance to apply the principles of Satyagraha. In Champaran, in Bihar, British landlords forced peasants to grow indigo instead of food, taking most of their earnings. I saw their despair and fear, and I decided we would resist but without violence. I led the peasants to stand firm and peaceful. We organized petitions, refused unjust demands, and when threatened with arrest, we accepted it calmly. To my surprise, the British authorities finally relented. It was a small victory, but for me, it had enormous meaning. India had tasted the power of nonviolent resistance for the first time. I knew the road would be long and hard, but in Champaran I was certain of one thing. India had the strength to change her destiny if she could believe in truth and nonviolence. Champaran was only the beginning. After it came Ahmedabad Kheda, new struggles of peasants and workers crushed under colonial power. And each time we proved again that when people refuse to cooperate with injustice, the empire weakens. But the British struck back. In 1919, they passed the Rowlatt Act, which allowed imprisonment without trial, a law that turned all of India into a prison. I was appalled such injustice could exist, and I resolved to lead a nationwide protest. We declared Satyagraha, strikes, peaceful gatherings, boycotts of institutions. But in April that year came an event that scarred our movement forever. In Amritsar, thousands had gathered peacefully in Jallianwala Bagh. British General Dyer ordered his troops to fire on these unarmed men, women, and children. Hundreds were killed. The news hit me like lightning. I saw that our path would be harder than I had imagined. Yet instead of abandoning it, I became more convinced. The only answer to such cruelty must be a firmer faith in nonviolence. I called for non-cooperation. I urged people, do not serve the system that enslaves you. Do not work in British offices. Do not attend their schools. Do not wear their cloth. Let us return to our roots, to simple living, to the spinning wheel and hand weaving. Many laughed, saying spinning yarn could never defeat an empire. But for me, the spinning wheel was a symbol of independence and self-respect. Each turn of the wheel was a protest against injustice. Our struggle was not easy. Many were jailed, many suffered. But slowly, a new consciousness was rising. India began to believe that freedom was possible. Our movement grew stronger, but the British did not yield. They raised taxes and punished harshly anyone who dared resist. One of the most unjust laws was the monopoly on salt. Salt, a necessity of life, was taxed, and ordinary people could not legally make it themselves. I decided salt would become our symbol. I said, if we are to be truly free, we must begin with the things that touch every life. And so I announced a march to the sea. On March 12, 1930, I left my ashram in Sabarmati. I was only a small man with a staff in my hand, but thousands walked behind me. We marched more than 300 kilometers to the sea, day after day, village after village. People joined us, sang, prayed, and all of India watched. After 24 days, we reached the shore at Dandi. There I bent down, scooped seawater into my hand, and let it dry in the sun until only salt remained. It was a simple gesture, and yet it was a challenge to an empire. Millions across the country followed. They made salt themselves, refused to pay taxes, filled the prisons. The British responded harshly, arresting us by the thousands. I too was imprisoned. But the Salt March had shown the world that India was no longer passive. Newspapers in London, America, and Europe wrote about it. Suddenly, the struggle for Indian freedom was on the lips of the world. And the world began to see that nonviolence was not weakness. It was a force that could shake the foundations of an empire. As I sat in prison in those days, I felt certain our march for salt was more than protest. It was the beginning of the journey that would finally lead India to freedom. When the Second World War broke out, India again faced a great trial. The British dragged us into war without our consent. Indian soldiers were sent to fight in Europe, Africa, and Asia, while at home our people lived in poverty and bondage. Many of us were divided. Some believed we should help the British, since they fought Hitler and fascism. But I felt it was wrong to fight for Europe's freedom while our own land remained in chains. In 1942, we resolved to speak with one voice. At a Congress session in Bombay, I gave a speech that became known by its slogan, "Quit India." I said, "Be ready to die, but never to submit. This is our greatest chance. Let this movement become such a storm that the world will see our strength." The British response was immediate and harsh. The entire Congress leadership, including myself, was imprisoned. We were held in isolation, cut off from our people. But the movement could not be stopped. Strikes, demonstrations, uprisings filled the streets. Even as the British crushed us brutally, they knew India would not wait forever. In prison, I thought of the price we paid. My wife Kasturbai was imprisoned with me. She was a courageous woman who had supported me all her life. And in 1944, within the prison walls, after 60 years of life together, Kasturbai died. It was a loss I carried with deep sorrow. Yet even in that pain, I knew the day was near when India would rise. Quit India was not only a call, it was a vow that we would never again live in bondage. After the war, it was clear Britain could no longer hold its empire. India was determined to be free. When I returned from prison, I saw the independence movement had gathered an unstoppable force. But with that force came division. My Muslim brothers, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, feared they would not be safe in a united India. They demanded their own state, Pakistan. I believed in unity, in Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians living side by side as brothers. But my faith was not enough. In 1947, the British announced their withdrawal. India became free, but also divided. Two new nations were born, India and Pakistan. The freedom we had struggled for was paid with the partition of our land. As I saw joy in the eyes of those who celebrated independence, I could not rejoice. My heart was heavy. Partition brought bloodshed, mass migrations, and violence that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Neighbors who once lived together turned against each other. In those days, I did not go to Delhi to celebrate. I went to the villages and cities where people suffered. I fasted, prayed, and tried to be a voice of reconciliation. I wanted to show that freedom meant nothing unless it rested on love and coexistence. India was free, but in my heart remained a shadow, the shadow of partition and the pain that accompanied our liberty. After independence, I did not feel like a victor. My India was free but divided, and the blood of innocents still stained the land. In those days, I lived simply in a small home, surrounded by prayer, fasting, and service. I tried to calm the passions that partition had unleashed. When violence broke out between Hindus and Muslims, I went into the streets and villages. I fasted until the killing stopped and begged people to remember we were all children of one God. But not all agreed with me. Some radicals saw me as a traitor for seeking reconciliation with Muslims. I believed love and understanding were stronger than hatred. They saw weakness. On January 30th, 1948, I went to my regular evening prayer meeting in New Delhi. It was around 5 o'clock when a man named Natharam Godse approached me. He carried a hatred I could not turn aside. He drew a pistol and fired 3 shots. I fell to the ground. My last words, "Hey Ram, oh God." My life ended, but my thoughts live on. Nonviolence, truth, determination. These are not mere words. They are paths any person, any community, any nation can walk. I believe the world will one day understand that true strength lies not in weapons or power, but in the heart that can forgive. And if my message can inspire even a single soul, then my life was not in vain. My dear friends, you have now heard the story of my life. Not of a perfect man, but of a simple soul who sought truth and nonviolence above all. If my journey has touched your heart, I ask you to carry these ideas forward. Let truth be your guide, and let compassion be your strength. And if you wish to continue walking with me and with other voices from history, then I humbly invite you to support this channel. Leave a like, share these words, and subscribe, so that together we may keep alive the echoes of the past for the generations to come. For in remembering, we learn. And in learning, we find the courage to build a better world.